Hello folks, and welcome back to another episode of Paint by Minis. As always, my name is Adam, and I'm really excited for this video because we're talking about my favourite aspect of miniature painting. And weirdly enough, it's the bases. I know, you would think it would be the much more interesting things that we paint on the models themselves, but no, for me, it's the bases. I think the reason I like basing so much is really the icing on the cake of a good paint job. It cements the character in the world that they exist in, and it can add so much interest to the model. Not only that, but it offers so much more creative freedom. A lot of the time we're painting models for a narrative reason or of some pre-existing lore, so we don't have a lot of freedom to what colours we want to paint them, and it can feel quite constricting. But with basing, honestly, we can put them wherever we want, and I think it's that freedom that really interests me. But I get it. Not a lot of people share this sentiment. They often get to the end of a paint job and they've forgotten the base and they just slap some sand and PVA glue on it and call it a day. So in today's video, I'm going to show you an even better way to get an even better looking base. So we're quickly just going to run through the materials that we're going to use for this, and it's actually only 3 items. The main thing that we're going to use is this Vallejo texture. This stuff is absolutely fantastic. It's my go-to for ground texture. The main thing I love isn't the colour of this, but more so the particulate that's in it. The benefit of this is that it goes much better in scale with the models that we're working on. You often find if you use sand on your bases that it can actually look really big compared to the model, but you don't run into this problem with the Vallejo stuff. As an alternative, you can use the Games Workshop stuff, and you can even use other things like the Pro Acryl range. The only thing I don't like about the Pro Acryl stuff and the Games Workshop stuff is that it's much bigger material inside, so it doesn't quite go as well in terms of scale. But if it's all you've got and you want to use it up, it's absolutely fine. So the only other 2 things that we're using alongside the texture paste is just some fine stones that I've got. And these I actually got from a very old Games Workshop kit. They used to sell their own basing kit, and it came with some slate and some stones, some glue, some static grass, and this has lasted me over 10 years. I only use it quite sparingly just to add some texture differences, and it works super well. And last but not least, we are going to use the trusty cork. This material is so versatile when making bases. And for today, we're going to use it to create some larger rocks or boulders. So now that we've got all our materials together, the first thing that we're going to do is create the small boulders from this cork. So to do this, I'm going to take my clippers and I'm going to work them into the cork and kind of just pull out shards. This stuff makes for really convincing rocks, and the bonus is they're not super heavy, so they're not going to fall off the base. So now all our prep work is done, it's time to move on to the fun stuff and actually get to building the base. So starting off with the Vallejo texture paste, we're just going to get a nice even layer over the whole base. The trick here is to use a stippling motion with the brush. Doing so, we avoid leaving any brush strokes behind. It also gives a nice uneven and natural looking texture. This is what it should look like once you're finished applying the texture paste. You don't want it too thick, or trust me, it's going to take absolutely ages to dry. Next up, it's time to apply the large rocks we made out of cork. And we're not going to use any glue, instead we're going to apply these while the texture paint is still nice and wet. Just to make sure we're getting good adhesion, I'm going to apply a little bit of extra texture paste to the bottom of the rock. And then it's just a simple case of getting your sausage fingers and sticking it right down into the texture paint. Now that we've got the rock attached to the base, you'll notice that it's sitting a little proud of the surface. This looks a little unnatural, so to blend it in a bit more, we're going to take a little bit extra texture paste and just stipple it around the edges of the rock to blend the transition. This way it'll look like it's sitting in the dirt instead of being placed on top of the dirt. It's quick little tricks like this that go such a long way to making the base look extra special. So because I've got a nice open base here, I've gone with 3 rocks, but if you've got a large infantry model or something else, just maybe go for 1 or 2, or maybe even just make your cork a little bit smaller. The last thing that we want to do is clutter the base. So for the last step, and this is really going to tie everything together, we're going to use the smaller rocks and just sprinkle them, focusing mainly around the large rocks that we've already put in. This way we will blend the transition between the big rocks and the small Vallejo texture paste, and it will look much more natural. Now that we're happy with the placement of the stones, they look nice and random and very natural looking, it's time to fix them into place, and to do this we're just going to tap them down with a paintbrush. Because the texture paste is still nice and wet, we can just sink these down into the texture paste and it will stick them like glue. You may lose one or two here or there, honestly it doesn't matter, as long as the majority of the stones are fixed in place, it will look great. So I've now given the base a good couple of hours to fully dry. You want to make sure it's nice and dry before we move on to the next step, because we don't want it to be wet while we try and paint it. And because this is a nice quick basing scheme, we don't want to spend absolutely ages painting it, so we're really only going to use 3 colours to paint this. Firstly, we're going to use black, and we're going to paint all of the big cork rocks in this colour. I'm also going to pick out a few of the smaller pebbles with this black colour. Now don't worry too much about priming these materials, the paint will go on nice and easy. And now all of the black bits are picked out, we're going to do an overall dry brush on everything, and we're going to use Celestra Grey to do this. This will help tie the darker black rocks into the more natural looking earth and give everything a nice highlight. Now that the dry brushing is done, we are going to go back with a wash and completely tie everything together nicely with one simple step. The wash I'm using is Sephiroth Sepia, but you could also use Agrax Earthshade if you want a slightly darker tone. The trick with this is not to apply it evenly all over the base. Apply a few areas of Sephiroth Sepia and then just get some water on your brush and blend them all together. That will give some natural variation to the tone on the base. Another super useful tip when painting fast like this is don't wait for this wash to dry before painting the rim black. What you'll find is the black paint from the rim will slowly creep up the edges around where the wash is still wet on top. Pick up some of the black that is bleeding over and just feather it into the Sephiroth Sepia. This way we get nice natural areas of darker and lighter tones. And with that we are finished. So there we have it folks, we are all done. I really hope you enjoyed this video. It just goes to show that just changing a few materials or maybe even a few processes and you can get a really good looking base without actually investing that much more time. If anything, this might be quicker than the old sand and PVA trick. Now if you've got any questions or queries about the video, please leave them in the comments below. I try to get back to everyone that I can. And if you want to see different types of bases, maybe a snow base or a jungle base, maybe even something a little more alien, then leave it in the comments below. Let me know what you want to see and I'll see if I can make a video on it in the future. But for now, thank you very much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.